Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen wassalatu wassalamu ala Sayyidina Muhammad. Stephen Fry, who's a famous comedian and actor in the UK, he remarked on an interview, he said about the world, he said, yes, the world is very splendid, but it also has in it insects whose whole life cycle is to burrow into the eyes of children and make them blind. They eat outwards from the eyes. Why? Why did you do this to us? And he's referring to God, na'udhu billah. You could easily have made a creation in which that didn't exist. It is simply not acceptable. One of the key arguments brought up constantly against belief in God is the argument known as the problem of evil. And it's brought up by various atheists, people who have problems with regards to the belief in the Creator for a number of different reasons, or two main reasons. The first one that they bring up is a logical argument that is meant to show the contradictory nature of asserting an all-powerful, all-good God. The second reason why people bring this up is because it's an emotional argument. You know, if bad things happen to them, they're not happy about it, they want to look to blame somebody, therefore they see God as the reason for the problems and the difficulties in their life. You know, if God exists, why would I be put through these various difficulties? Why isn't my life achieving only good outcomes? Why am I not achieving the maximum benefit? So these are the two angles to the argument. One is a logical argument or an intellectual argument, and the other one is more of an emotional argument. And to be honest, it's actually a harder argument to address, the emotional argument, because it goes to the very emotional disposition of a person. But let's take the first, which is the intellectual, or the claim that there's an apparent contradiction in the logic of believing in an all-powerful, all-good God. So the argument is presented by the Greek philosopher known as Epicurus. And Epicurus states, God is either willing to remove evil or is not able, or else he is both willing and able. If he is willing and not able, he must then be weak, which cannot be affirmed of God. If he is able and not willing, he must be envious, which is likewise contrary to the nature of God. If he is neither willing nor able, he must be both envious and weak, and consequently not God. If he is both willing and able, which only can agree in the notion of God, then why proceeds evil, or whence then proceeds evil? So what Epicurus is basically saying, he's arguing that if you've got an all-good, all-powerful God, then why would this all-good, all-powerful God create evil or allow evil to exist within the world? So either God is not all good, but he's all-powerful. So if that's the case, then that can't be the what they call the conception of God, because God has to be maximally good. Or God is not all-powerful. He may be all-good, but he's not able to stop the evil, so therefore he's not all-powerful. And in such a case, he isn't a God. So they say, okay, this problem of evil demonstrates the contradictory nature in the attributes of the Creator, or attributes of God being all-good and all-powerful, but yet evil exists. And if evil exists, therefore God does not exist. That's the argument. There's a number of flaws in this contention, and this is what we'll seek to address. Firstly, what the atheists claim, what are they when they claim that there's evil? They're referring to two types of evil. Firstly, evil like natural events, volcanoes, earthquakes, diseases, floods, etc. These are things outside of human control, but is labelled as evil due to the damage they cause on life and the environment. Then there's another type of evil called moral evil. That is where humans decide to perform evil acts like murder, theft, rape, etc. So the problem with this argument is that the problem of evil argument is that it presupposes that God exists with only two main attributes of being all-powerful and all-good. However, the argument ignores the fact that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the Creator, has other attributes like all-knowing and all-wise, amongst other names. there could be a conceivable reason why evil exists, and such a reason might be that it leads to a greater good. Let me give an example of this. Imagine if you had an illness, you go to your doctor says you've got a bacterial infection, so you're given antibiotics. And you find that while you're in the middle of the course of antibiotics, you get an upset stomach and maybe even diarrhea. In the short term, you don't feel much better. In fact, you probably feel worse. But in the long term, your condition is cured, and the side effects from the medication, they're gone. So would it be rational to claim that the doctor is evil or not capable because in the short term you suffer from side effects for the treatment? No, because it leads to a greater good. And so you suffer from some side effects in order to achieve the cure, something better. Similarly, we have to appreciate that while we are temporal creatures, meaning we live within, time, so we can't see the future. We go from the past to present to the future. We can't see what's going on. That we have a very limited perspective and a very individualistic perspective. From an individual, I can only see from my own perspective at a very limited scope of the reality. The Creator, however, is not bound by these limitations. The Creator exists beyond time, and the Creator is all-knowing, and therefore knows past, present, and future as one source of knowledge. While we have a very small perspective of the universe, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has total perspective of the universe, i.e. the whole picture. And so the Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions in the Quran a particular story, and I'm going to not go into the details of the story, but just make one or two points to highlight this issue. The Quran explains a story about Khidr and Musa alayhi salam. And there's various examples in which Khidr, he undertook actions that from Musa alayhi salam's perspective, from his view, he saw it as evil, as wrong. But when Khidr finally mentioned the overall reasons behind this, and behind why he did it, and why God told him and ordered him to do it, then Musa alayhi salam was able to see the good in them. For example, when Khidr, he damaged a ship that was laden full of goods from a town, and it stopped it from, traveling in order to engage in trade to faraway towns. And Khidr mentioned the reason why he damaged the ship was because the ship was going to pass through the seaways of a king who was going to take that wealth and use it for his own revenue. And so to save the revenue and the wealth of the town, he damaged the ship to prevent it from sailing. So this striking example shows that sometimes certain things we see as bad, but rather they have a greater good that results from them. There's a greater reason for these limited bad things, even if we don't know the reason. Another example of this is like volcanoes. They may be destructive, but they also fertilize the soil to allow plants to grow and also therefore crops. So the first criticism to this argument of the problem of evil that atheists give us is to say that we cannot term something truly evil or bad while being ignorant of the full picture of what will happen. We are arguing from an ignorant perspective. Secondly, terms like good and evil are problematic terms anyway for atheists. What do we mean by good? What do we mean by evil? How do we assess these terms and make moral judgments, particularly from a materialistic outlook? Are volcanoes, for example, evil, or are they simply events within the universe? From a materialistic perspective, from just viewing everything that we are just a product of the universe, from the physical universe, then events like hurricanes, like volcanoes, like earthquakes that damages lives and properties, they're neither good nor bad. They're just events within the universe. So this materialistic or atheistic worldview has a fundamental problem in being able to determine whether we can even make these types of moral judgments against earthquakes and natural disasters. But it gets even worse, it gets even problematic for them. For instance, if the universe began to exist from nothing, by nothing, and for no reason whatsoever, and that the universal laws are that determine the behavior of objects and events within the universe just happen to exist the way that they do. So the universe came into existence, happens to have these laws, and these laws, affect the behavior of matters. Then events like earthquakes, etc., are simply the product of these universal. There's no morality, but also there's no morality for human beings as well. We cannot say what is a morally wrong or what's a morally right or morally wrong judgment. And that's because the human decision-making process from a materialistic atheist worldview, the human decision-making process is built upon blind, naturalistic, non-explanatory events that take place. So blind materialistic events that take place. Then we have no choices over our behavior. Think about it. If your choices are determined by unconscious processes taking place in your brain only, and these conscious processes are simply following universal laws, nobody determined these universal laws, they just happen to exist the way they did, then when we think we are making a choice, is in reality simply following the inevitable chemical reactions, and other physical reactions occurring within our brains. So we're not really making moral choices. We're not free and making free choices. Therefore, from a materialistic view, we don't have this concept of free will. We don't have the ability to make free choices. So if we don't have the ability to make free choices, how can we determine whether something or even someone's action are good and evil, or good or evil? We can't, because we can't say the person's made the choice or not. He didn't have the moral choice. He was compelled to make those choices due to his brain chemistry, following universal laws that are predicated his actions. Just like the black widow spider, we can't say the black widow spider is evil because the female spider eats its mate after mating with the male spider. You can't say, well, that's a bit of an evil action to do. It was determined to do that action. It didn't have a choice. The difference between us and in that situation is only the fact that we have the illusion that we have a choice. But in reality, according to this particular view, atheist materialistic view of the production of the human mind and everything else within the universe, then there are no choices. And if there are no choices, there are no moral judgments. I don't make the decision to be morally good or morally bad. That decision has already been predetermined since the time of the beginning of the Big Bang. Intuitively, we accept that we can make moral choices. And the only way to explain this, that we have free will and that we can make moral choices, is actually believing that there is a creator, a necessary being beyond the universe, who created us with the ability to make free choices. A further point, simply saying so this is the third point now. Simply saying I don't like the effect of a certain event doesn't determine the event as evil, just because I don't like it. So I don't like something or I like something doesn't make things good or evil based upon my likes and dislikes. Because if you make your likes and dislikes the basis of your moral decisions, then they will render all morality subjective to you. There is no objective moral value now. And if there's no objective moral value beyond you yourself, then how can you apply this upon the Creator? It's just your own subjective tastes. This points to the fact that morality also is built upon a person's viewpoint on life and is not an objective fact and can be sensed, and that we cannot determine morality objectively simply sensing it from the acts themselves, but rather we understand what our morality is, and then, or as a metaphysical principle or as an assumption or upon how we view our purpose of life, and then we superimpose this upon events and actions that take place. Therefore, when you have a Muslim, a morally good act will be determined by his viewpoint that he is here to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and seek the pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So that action which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is pleased with is termed good. The action that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is displeased with is termed evil. So good and evil is termed according to this framework. So from an Islamic point of view, we don't say natural disasters are good or evil. They're neither good nor evil. Rather, they're just events. And the good and the evil, the moral judgments are based, or the morality or the accountability in terms of what is how we respond to such an event. This will determine whether what we're doing is morally good or is morally evil. I.e., do we respond to a natural disaster or an event that's outside of our control according to the commands of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, or are we going to respond to it according to what displeases the Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and therefore outside the commands of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? In this way, the Muslim is given a unique view towards events. He may not like it, which may be beyond his control, but he understands how to respond to those events in a moral way by following the commands and prohibitions laid down in Islam and laid down by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is different to a capitalist who sees good and evil only in the paradigms of likes and dislikes, or more specifically, what gives them pleasure and what keeps the pain away, or what causes material benefit and material harm. This viewpoint, therefore, is effectively saying, how do we maximize that? Our purpose of life here is to maximize our pleasures and maximize our own benefit. That's how he views life. It cannot factor in, as a result, illnesses, because illnesses, as a result, damages his health, stops him from having a good time. As a result, from that viewpoint, he terms an illness an evil. So, when a person faces a natural disaster that causes him pain or material loss, are viewed from this angle, from a capitalist angle, and leaves a person without the emotional or psychological concepts that provide them with patience and perseverance to overcome such difficulty, or to help others face such difficulty, believing that the ultimate good is with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So if you think you're here to achieve ultimate pleasures in this life and you don't achieve it, then what's going to happen? You're going to feel depressed, you're going to feel sad, you're going to not have those psychological support mechanisms, concepts that are going to allow you to face the difficulties within life. The Prophet ﷺ stated, amazing is the affair of the believer. Verily all of his affair is good. And this is not for one except the believer. So amazing is the affair of the believer. If something is good, something of good or happiness befalls him, he is grateful, and that is good for him. And if something of harm befalls him, he is patient, and that is good for him. So any situation for a believer is always good. If he faces good, if he faces something that he likes, then alhamdulillah, he's grateful to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. If he faces something difficult and he's patient and persevering with it, then alhamdulillah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is pleased with him and will reward him greatly in the hereafter. So therefore, so this gives a very unique view towards how we understand good and evil, that they are relational views. And so even if somebody turns around and says, you know what, I can understand that, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala exists, but why would I be put in that situation? The denial of the belief in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will not secure that person from life's difficulties. He will still face life's difficulties. The only difference is that that person who denies the belief in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will have no ability to look forward to a greater reward on the Day of Judgment, will not have those psychological, emotional stabilizers that allows them to overcome these types of difficulties. So to summarize, the problem of evil argument fails on a number of grounds. Firstly, it reduces the attributes of the Creator simply all good and all powerful, whereas we believe the Creator is also all wise and all knowing amongst other names. Therefore, we cannot, from our limited view of life, be able to determine whether a particular event at a particular moment in time is good or bad. That the Creator has the full picture and thus is fully aware of what that particular event will lead to. Secondly, good and bad are arbitrary terms we apply from our viewpoint on life. For a person following the capitalist ideology of maximizing benefit, minimizing pain, then he judges events from that viewpoint. For a Muslim, we view life as a test whether we fulfill the commandments of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala or do we disobey the commandments of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So when we look at events that take and affect us, we will view it from this perspective. And also thirdly, that belief in the Creator gives us the psychological and emotional stability. Concepts such as rizq, the wealth comes from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Concepts such as patience and perseverance, the concepts that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will reward those people who are facing difficulty in this life, that whenever anything afflicts them, then it removes their sins. That these things help us navigate the difficulties and the inevitable problems that we will face in life. This is what the belief in the Creator gives us, and therefore it makes more sense, even from an emotional perspective, that belief in a Creator creates that sakina, that tranquility in the heart, whereas atheism and simply rejecting God out of some emotional angst will not create that particular stability nor tranquility, or nor therefore ultimately happiness in the long run with the individual. Thank you.